Thank you so much for your presentation. That was really beautiful. Of course, all of you, your presentation are very beautiful. And of course, what we love here is that we are adding value coming from different angle and it make it more rich. That is what I found to be really very interesting at the end of the day. I like when you talk about the memory building, and I think that is really very important for us because when we are talking about storytelling, that's what we are actually trying to instigate in the people. There is a project I was saying before in the beginning of this presentation, which we call Life and Legacy. Then we also talk of how to connect among ourselves because when we are sharing story, we are sharing our connection, we are sharing what have happened before, possibly what can also happen in the future. But we are trying to connect people. That is fundamentally important for us. Now, where I'm really going with the question is, how should we be intentional in using storytelling to build our memory? What do you have to share with us?
Yeah, I think it starts with understanding your target audience, and what their stories are. And so if you can embed yourself into their story instead of like Neil was saying, you don't want to change their behavior, but instead insert yourself into a habit that they already have is really an easier way. So like the beers you already had this marriage habit and they inserted the diamond into that, right? So what you want to do is really figure out ways of making associations between your brand and things they already know and love very well. And and the more you know about their story, what they're trying to accomplish, the easier it is to find ways to connect an association between your offering and something they already do. That's much easier than changing something altogether to get them to go down a different path.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. Now, there is something I'm thinking on. It has to do with is it a good thing or a bad thing when we talk about storytelling? And I think you were also tickling with that line before during your presentation. Now, this is my thought. Are you an entrepreneur struggling to stand out in a crowded market? Your secret weapon is your story. Discover how to make your competition irrelevant by owning your story. Want to learn more? Check out our signature program, Own Your Story, a 5-week training to reshape your narrative. The link is what you see on your screen, academy.aclasses.org/story. Now back to the conversation. Any person who knows how to use storytelling can do anything, but anything is anything in that it is neutral. Sometimes you can use it for good, you can use it for bad. My curiosity or my question really is the process the same in our mind? That is what I'm trying to understand there.
I think so because good and bad is actually kind of a, a moral decision that each of us makes a little bit independently. Like there's shared morals, but a bad person's moral compass is going to be different from ours. And this quote bad person might not necessarily think of what they're doing as bad. And I think that might be what's really important here. They might be trying to serve a greater good by doing something they know isn't quite ethical, maybe, but they aren't always necessarily trying to do something bad with this information. It might look bad to somebody else, but I think it's important to understand that people with a completely different perspective might not see what they're doing as bad. So they're like making money at all costs might not be a bad thing in the eyes of somebody that thinks that capitalism is the standard for the world, right? That's their guiding light. So I think you have to look at it a bit about, what's their perspective on this. I have a feeling that it's the same process, but I bet Neil has done more direct research on this that I don't have.
Yeah, and that's why I focus so much on the cultural part of that and how the unconscious brain is interpreting things so fast. My novel and is really largely about psychopaths and sociopaths, and the idea that they do not feel guilt, They do not feel shame. And these are, it's now the psychopath they believe is born, the sociopath they believe is created, but you can actually see the difference in their with MRIs that psychopaths have different brains. And so the idea of good, bad, right, left, moral, amoral. I mean, these are fascinating ideas to understand from a brain, neuroscience perspective. There's these experiments. Gunnar was doing the Milgram experiment. There's another experiment where they would shock people, and with varying degrees. In a normal person, the longer the time between being shocked, their anxiety would go up and up. A psychopath, there's no reaction to them. They see it differently. But that's where we take so many cultural assumptions with us about morality that are assumed, getting back to Deidre's expectations, that are just, it's critical to, in any kind of story to kind of be able to, understand the frame that you're operating in terms of what is perceived as good or bad.
What is perceived as good or bad. I wish this were a solo episode. We could only take this to a rabbit hole, because these are important conversation I really like to do a lot. Because now there is a part of it that is highly philosophical that need an explanation. Because the question, therefore, that will naturally come to me now will be, what is evil bad and what is good? How do we arrive at the point that something is bad and the other is good? And is it intrinsically really good or bad? How do we define that? Maybe you can say something about that, then we'll move to Iris, because I'm going to be asking her about how do we learn. But first, can you say something about that?
Yeah, let me give you a kind of a weird example. I was doing some work with a charity that was working in West Africa, and I was talking to this young man from this country, and who lived here. So we were doing work in Africa, but the people I was working with lived here. And he said, the reason why we can't move forward, our country can't move forward. He said, if I opened up a store and I had all these items on in the store, my cousins would come in and expect me to give these items to them for free. And so I can't have a store because I can't operate that way. But what was right from a familial perspective in that culture was you share. And the idea of what's right in a capitalistic structure is you operate. You can only operate a store if you operate at a profit. And you can't. You have to recoup your costs, or you just go out of business. And so if you don't understand the frame about what is right and what's wrong, then you don't really have meaning in that culture.
But it's going to be very important now, because you want to say to people, and like you are correctly saying, if you don't know the frame of reference for these people, how are you going to be able to, because you want to condition something in their mind, you want to change their worldview, you want to make them understand that what you are doing is important. Otherwise, how are they going to take it? How are they going to give you money so that you can give them something? How are you going to make this transaction? I think it's a
right. I would say you can't change the world without a good story.
You're so right. You're so right. All right. Erie Tisley, are you there? Say something. Let's hear your voice.
Okay, I have unmuted myself. I didn't want to interrupt anyone else's talks.
No.
So I am
You're
here.
welcome. You're welcome. No, it get to the point that it becomes very interesting. All right. So the first question I want to ask you, it have to do with the learning, because that is important. How do we learn? I think you really hammered that a lot in your presentation. The learning how to learn. I think that is important for me. So the question therefore is, how do we really learn? What do you say about that?
I would say we learn by the use of signs and symbols. In the US, we normally start with our ABCs, and then we take all those individual symbols and they become words. I also spoke about my son being deaf. So I had to learn a new language in that using my hands, but they have a different sign symbol, like A, B, C, all the way to Z or Z, depending on where you live. And then you put those things together. And then depending on where you've grown up and what has been your culture, because in some cultures, there's a higher priority put on educating the males versus the females. Or do you even have the means to educate your children? So starting with that smallest part and then continuing to add on to that, and then to know about learning differences in the children.
Right. Thank you so much for that. And that automatically leads me to the responsibility that might come with learning or learning how to learn. Because if we now agree that we can learn how to learn, does that also mean that we can also learn how to unlearn so that we can relearn what we want to learn? I don't know if that is complicated, but could you say something about that?
I think it goes back to, I guess I would go back to some of the things that Neil was saying when he was talking about that motivation and some of those innate things that are within us, that we want to use the path of least resistance. Our brain wants to do it the easiest way possible. But also we are, I'm trying to think of the best way to put, I would just say, some people are just stubborn as heck, and they're not really trying to do anything different unless there's some kind of motivation, going back to what Neil said when they said, we will offer you this to get you to do that. And that goes back to knowing the other person. What is it that motivates them? Is it culturally relevant? Why should they change? And a lot of times in the military, we might say, we're going to increase the pain index, that we're going to make it so unpleasant for you that now you will do this thing we need you to do. Or it could be, I'm going to offer you something so great, you won't be able to say no to changing. So a lot of it depends on what is the motivation and what is it you're trying to get them to do. And do they want to do it? Because a lot of people don't know what they don't know. And that we kind of act out of fear that, no, I'm not going to do that because I have predictability over here. And you're trying to get me to go to a space where it's unpredictability, or that scarf model comes into play. It's just, I don't know what's going to happen to me. But I know even if my current state is unpleasant, I know it. So why should I change? And sometimes we always talk about leadership being getting the person to do something, creating that environment where they will want to do it. Not that you're coercing or forcing them to do it. Because our natural impulse is to resist when we feel like somebody's making us do something.
All right, that is important. In fact, I was going to ask you a question that related to when maybe you might use the forces of coercion to make somebody do something because maybe you have the power. Say maybe, for example, you'd even arrest a criminal. Say maybe you are a police officer, and because what the police will usually do, of course, what they often do is that they talk to you. Because they are very good in the kind of questioning that they do to you, you will come to reveal what you have inside of you. Because I think storytelling is so powerful. Because I could really make you cry without taking a cane to flog you. I will tell you something that will make you reveal what you had inside. So experts, there are really experts in this world who are able to do this using all sort of. Thank you for watching. Are you enjoying the video? Let us know in the comment section. My mission is to help professionals like you to own their story. What would that do for you, you might ask? Well, it helps you make your competition irrelevant. Want to learn more? Check out our signature program, Own Your Story, a 5-week training to reshape your narrative. The link is what you see on your screen, academy.aclasses.org/story. Now back to the conversation. All sort of techniques to make you say something, reveal what you have inside. And these people are not really beating you. I think sometimes they are even more effective than torture, because what I want to say is, how do we know the motivation of people, why they do something? Because I believe now that if what I have is force, if I beat you, you might tell me something. Maybe that is not what I really want to know. But maybe what is really going to make the change or change the needle at the end of the day, if I really, really know the real motivation behind your action, I think that is going to change everything. Therefore, the question is, how do we really know? What are the steps that we should take as business people to know, okay, in this case now, looking at the audience, to know what is the motivation of our client so that we can better serve them? Share with me.
I would say the best way to know is getting to know the person. Getting to know them, which you may, I won't call it, where where you've done your market research, where what is it that my client needs or wants, not based on what I want to give them, but on what they desire. And then we have the two gentlemen who've done, more marketing and looking at people. But what is it that they desire? Not what I want to give you, but what is it that I can offer you that you're already expecting and want? So doing your market research with the people that you choose to serve. And not everybody is gonna, I will be for certain people. I say I won't be for everybody.
I hear you. And that is vitally important in business, that we need to realize that we are not serving them.
I meet their needs, not I do what I want to do. You know what I mean? I'm meeting the client's needs. And there'll be some clients that I will say no to. And there will be many clients who will say no to me. That's why it's so clear to know who are you serving? Who is your ideal client? And then to serve them and meet their needs and their desires. And it's not about you. You're only providing a service.
Thank you so much for that. All right. I've got a question for Morrison. Now, let's say the person who you want to understand his or her motivation is not a business environment. I don't want to say criminal again and put you in the position of an investigator. But let's say it's somebody you want to know the motivation because you want to avert a situation, whatever it might be. What are the strategies to be able to know what is behind this person's action?
Okay, well, that very much depends on how deep you want to go with this. But I think that when Marcia was talking, she gave a great example of a strategy to uncover somebody's motivation, because when she was talking about that patient, they looked at what was important to him, what were the values that were important to him. And his values included the hard work and contributing and all of those things that were relevant, that gave meaning to his life. So this is one of the key things that we can try and understand about people. What do they value? Now, we don't all have the same values, for sure. We don't consider the same things rewarding or threatening. And these are also things that we need to consider. What is it that people will move towards, be motivated by? What is it that they will move away from? And Professor Richard Boyatzis talks a lot about positive emotional attractors and negative emotional attractors, which, we can kind of shortcut and think of that as carrot and stick, really. And going back to some of what Iris was talking about there a minute ago, and maybe Gunnar mentioned that too, about what you're going to be able to effectively threaten people with or attract people with. These are, personally, I am not into using the negative emotional attractors. I do not think that these are helpful for the world as a whole. And I much prefer to understand what it is that is useful and valuable and can contribute to an overall better world than trying to find ways to make people feel like they're missing out on something, or that they will be that they will not have that they will lose something. These are unhelpful ways to motivate people. That is an opinion, and I'm sure not everybody would agree with that, but it's certainly the way I like to work.
That's interesting. So were you talking about something like that, the fear of losing out that is often used in marketing, is something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's prevalent, isn't it? That we try and make people feel like if they don't act now, they're going to miss out. If they don't buy this, they're going to miss out. If they don't have this upgrade or that thing, that they're not going to have enough. And to my mind, these are not necessarily true for the person, but we make them feel like they're true.
Thank you so much for that. Now, during your presentation, you made mention of a neuroplasticity. I don't know how many T I even pronounced this. All right. And I'm curious, because of the fact that we know that our brain is able to learn and adapt and change all the time. How could we use this to shape our narrative? And maybe again, we're in business because we want to be able to serve other people. That is why we are there anyway. But now we want to shape a narrative that we want to communicate to the people. And how would neuroplasticity help us in that area, in that situation?
Okay, well, let's rewind a little bit to what you were talking to Iris about, because what we've got when we've got neuroplasticity, it's a process that can strengthen over time. So when we make these new neural connections, it's not just one and done always. So for instance, if you think of an analogy of making a track of footprints through the snow, if you've just walked through the snow one time, you have a pretty loose track that's not very good for walking on. It's still difficult. If you walk over and back on it lots of times, it becomes much easier. And this is what it's a little bit like when we build these new connections. A thing called myelination happens along these connections, which insulates them and makes the signals run faster between the neurons. So if we think about a very easy example of this would be if you are brushing your teeth, you'll typically do it with your dominant hand. And it's very, very easy. You know all the contours in your mouth and you don't even think about it. You can do other things, think about other things when this is happening. But if for some reason you've got to swap hands and you've got to do it with the other hand, it's really difficult. Okay. So this is when we're getting someone to think about something differently or do something differently, then when we think about how the brain works and how expensive it is, as Neil had mentioned earlier, how expensive it is to run it, then we have to bear in mind that people don't necessarily want to make that change because that takes more energy. Building these connections, laying down that myelin along those axons is going to take more energy, which we don't really want to do unless we have to, unless we are motivated by something, unless there's a reward to it. So how can we use this? If we are trying to help people understand something new, then we have to remember that we've got to give them the time to do so. We can't really expect to put out a message one time, for instance, and just assume that A, everybody's seen it, B, everybody was listening, and C, everybody has taken everything we said on board. We have to give people opportunities to hear and learn things multiple times. So I know a lot of people find this quite uncomfortable when they are promoting their businesses or when they're trying to help people understand what it is they do. Like they feel, oh, I've already said this. I can't keep saying the same thing over again. I can't keep talking about myself in this way. But in reality, you've got a couple of things going on here. One of the main ones, of course, is that not everybody was listening. If they were listening, they've probably forgotten. They might not have caught all of it. There's an awful lot going on in their minds. So you're still not their first priority unless you have something that they absolutely and utterly need right now to solve a problem. So that building awareness is part of, we are using neuroplasticity in that sense. We're giving people the opportunity to build those connections between these new things, these new ideas that we're presenting to them. And that does take time, it takes repetition, and it takes patience.
Thank you so much for that. You make me feel good a bit more. Because that is another thing that I in most of my book, the one that I have to do with maybe personal improvement, because I've written books that are just story, talk about story of people sort of in the line of research. But I've also written a couple of books that are just maybe topics relating to, say, maybe, for example, self-improvement, finding your identity. It is like when I just start to write, I establish the key line, the key point that I want to communicate. So throughout the book, I will just lace that line inside all the time, so that when you are reading this book, you will know that this is a repetition. So somebody might, but why are you repeating these things? Well, I'm intentionally repeating that because I want you to know that this is an important thing. So, of course, somebody could criticize me for that approach, but I do it on purpose. I'm not making a mistake. I just want to repeat it so that I want you to know that it is important. So, thank you for saying that.
There is something that we have this. We might know something cognitively, but we might not do anything about it. So we've got this knowing doing gap. So that also is very important to bridge that gap, so that we've actually really got the information embedded, and that we have built those connections strongly enough to have them to hand when we need them. So whether it's an exercise in personal development or something, we have to have the presence of mind and the strong enough connection with that information to be able to use it when it's relevant.
Thank you for that. All right. There was another thing also that I found very important in your presentation. I think your presentation was really heavy on expectation. And then you also talk about the short story that we create. And when you blend the two together, they were really powerful. So how could we use expectation and the short story that we are creating? How could we use it to manage our brand? Of course, our brand, and I'm talking of what we are in relation to who we are serving.
Okay, well, let's take an example of something that we want to be known for. Then we have to act on that. If we want to be known for excellent service or excellent quality, then we have to make sure that we put the effort into that so that people do feel like they can rely on it. I think that's a very easy example. If we want people to know that they can communicate easily with us, that we are available to them, then we have to consistently deliver on that, and that will help them to grow the expectation of what we want them to believe about us.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. Anyway, hang on, don't go anywhere. We are coming to you for the last time.